What's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Scares. Today we're bringing it back to our Resident Evil marathon of films with the second installment in the film series. It's Resident Evil Apocalypse. Now, out of the 6 movies that have come out in this entire franchise, I've got to admit that Apocalypse is probably the one that I think about the least and is the most forgettable. There's a few reasons for that, but it's not to say that the entire thing is bad or anything. In fact, there's a few things that I actually think are very good in comparison to the first film. But it is time to find out if the sinuous details in the plot are a good or bad thing, and let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, sinuous. Intricate or complex. Resident Evil Apocalypse takes Alice outside of the Hive and into the heart of Raccoon City, which after the Umbrella Corporation investigated the Hive, the T-virus that systematically creates zombies has now escaped into the city outside, and to stop it from spreading, the city has been put under quarantine. Furthermore, to kill the virus altogether, they plan to just cut their losses and nuke the city as a whole. A group of lone survivors inside Raccoon City, led by Alice and Jill Valentine, work with a man on the outside who promises them safe passage if they can find and save his daughter, who is also still trapped within the city limits. First, let's start with some of the best things in this movie. First of all, Mila Jovovich has finally embraced her character as Alice. In the first film, she was more or less a Jason Bourne type character who was unraveling a set of mysteries about herself, about the Umbrella Corporation, all that. In this movie, you find out more about who she is and what she can do, which apparently is quite a lot. She's basically a superhero with all these different abilities that are kind of crazy, and throughout this film, you kind of realize that we're not even a fraction of the way close to understanding her full potential. She still has all these mysteries to unlock and abilities to uncover. If anything else, that's one thing that you'll have a hard time missing in this movie. The series as a whole is definitely going to be all about Alice and what she can do. So anytime that she's on screen, this movie shines. She kicks butt, and I'm going to get a little bit premonitious here and say that it only gets better for Alice from here on out. Next, I definitely appreciated the bigger play area. There was something that worked for the Hive in the first film too, since such a small area can give the viewer a feeling of claustrophobia while watching. But when you take things outside and expand the area where things could potentially go wrong, then if they do it right, stakes will be raised, and I would say that they were definitely raised here. I'd even say, as a general rule, I appreciated how the film introduced quite a few video game characters in the film as well, including Jill Valentine, which is a major player in the video game series. She's essentially, the Alice of the video games, which is a pretty cool idea to have her in this movie. That being said, it did go a little bit too hard, a little bit too fast, and immediately got a bit too convoluted. There's too much happening all at once, and they should have just stuck to one story. That is, get the girl, escape the city. That's it. But because they wanted to introduce even more characters, like Nemesis, like Carlos, like the token black guy with a sense of humor, the film got unnecessarily confusing. All of these things on their own were fine. I mean, I liked Jill, I liked LJ, I liked Carlos and Nemesis, but they shouldn't have been in the same movie. They really shouldn't have. And yeah, I also like Jill, but having her in this movie kind of diluted Alice's role. Sometimes I feel like this is a good Resident Evil movie with Alice in the lead, and with certain scenes, I felt like Jill was the primary focus, and that kind of flip-flopping annoyed me. Again, I get it, she's a video game character, and she even acts like a video game character in this movie quite a bit. But there was just too much going on all at once. Another problem this film had was purely technical, and that was editing. Whenever you have high action-oriented films like this, you need to have fairly decent editing where the audience can always tell what's physically happening on screen. And you can't really tell what's happening in this movie much, especially when it comes down to hand-to-hand combat. There's unfortunately really close-up shots of the fighting with unbelievably quick edits. I'm sure to, set in stone the high-octane atmosphere the film was going for, but by doing that, the audience legitimately cannot see anything, not a darn thing. I'm sure they get the gist of what's happening, but that's not enough. I feel like later films in the series got a better handle on these action sequences, though. Anyways, that's about it. Let's talk about the final score for a second. From a technical, unbiased perspective, I'll just say this. The movie is definitely fair. It definitely had an upgrade in certain visuals, especially with the makeup and CGI, which helped it out quite a bit. It had a better eye for costume design as well as kicking up the action. The voice itself of the film was a little sillier than the first movie, but I actually appreciated that a little bit more as the franchise seems to be coming more into its own, something that the later films will really showcase. But at the same time, it was convoluted, it was messy, there were too many characters, and when they did that, they couldn't individually have their own stories to tell. They were diverse, but they still somewhat blended in together because they didn't individually have enough screen time. So that unbiased score is 64%. My biased score is a little bit higher at 72% because in general, I think it's a decent movie that has its moments, but definitely not my go-to film in the franchise. Averaging out the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 68%, 68 out of 100 possible stars, or a D letter grade. Judging by how most everybody else rates this franchise, I would say that normally people don't love this movie either, but I think most would typically place it higher than some of the later movies. I, on the other hand, remember really liking some of those later films. We'll see if that still stands true today. But until then, guys, tell me your thoughts on Resident Evil Apocalypse in the comment section down below. What moment stands out to you the most? Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, because there's always more like it coming out each and every single day. Hit the subscribe button and bell to be notified when I come out with my review for the third film in the series, Resident Evil Extinction. Until then, guys, peace out!
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert, he is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us.